Hello, and welcome to the Think MHK podcast presented by the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. On this episode, you will hear from two of the 15 Under 40 recipients. The 15 Under 40 program selects 15 nominees each year to honor and recognize the accomplishments of outstanding young professionals who make a positive impact in the community and excel in their industry. We look forward to hearing their stories. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm your host, Jason Smith, President and CEO of the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. So our guest today on the Think MHK podcast is another one of our 15 Under 40 recipients for 2024, Stephen Bridenstine, who's with the Flint Hills Discovery Center. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, good to be here.
Thanks for being with us. We always like to start off these interviews by letting our guests talk a little bit about themselves and where they're from and how they ended up in Manhattan, and then maybe talk about how you ended up with the Discovery Center and what do you do there?
Sure. Well, it all really goes back to the Discovery Center. It's the reason why I'm here in Manhattan. So I was living in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, working at a museum down there. I had a career that took me all over, working for the Park Service and different museums and sites and going to school in different locations. So I had been jumping around the country, lived in probably 6 different states over the course of 6 or 7 years. So I was in Florida at the time and wanted to try something different. So I found the job at the Discovery Center. I applied for it, I interviewed for it, and I accepted it without ever coming to Manhattan. Wow. It was all done remotely. This is way back in 2014. And so the first time I ever stepped foot in Manhattan, I was driving a moving truck, and I was coming over the 177 bridge. And by design, you come into town and there's the Discovery Center right there, welcoming me to Manhattan. And not only that, when I took the corner and I came around the front side of the building, this was in an evening in November. I look in and there's hundreds of people inside the Discovery Center because it just so happened to be the one day of the year I showed up on the Governor's Water Conference.
Oh, nice.
And the reception was filling the Discovery Center. And so that was quite an impressive introduction to see not only the building, but you come around and here it's 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night and it's filled with people, only to find out after the fact of what was going on. Yeah. But that was my introduction to Manhattan. And so at the time, I took the position to run the education program at the Discovery Center. Did that for about 7.5 years. And then the opportunity opened up to take on the assistant director role and really take on that additional responsibility. In the interim, I had gone back to school at K-State, got my master's in public administration degree, which was a huge asset and allowed me to not only learn more about this public sector nonprofits world that I had found myself in, but really helped me feel prepared to take on that bigger role, which I've been in now for almost 2 years. So
there's a lot there to follow up on. So where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Michigan. So I grew up in suburban Detroit and lived there my whole life. I'm a graduate of the University of Michigan and kind of had that whole life. And then after college, I went out into the world.
And how did you end up working at museums?
Really what it comes down to was I had a college professor my freshman year who they had these special courses where it was a small group, maybe 15 college freshmen with a full professor on a very narrow topic. And it happened to be Great Lakes history. And I ended up majoring in history, and it's what I loved. And when I was getting near the end of my 4 years there at Michigan, I had to figure out something. Keep in mind, this was 2008, and I was lucky enough that I had found an internship with the National Park Service, working at a small historic site, Grand Portage National Monument, way up in the northeast corner of Minnesota, 10 miles from Canada. And I literally got to dress up as an old-timey fur trader. I got to shoot a musket. I got to skin animals, cut up fish, talk to guests. It was the craziest job I've ever had. But it turned me on to public history, about doing history in a very active sense where you have an audience in front of you every day who come from another place. It's not a classroom. You're in the outdoors. You're in a historic site. You're talking about a place, its importance to a group of people who otherwise have no connection to it. And that's almost exactly what I have done at the Discovery Center, talking about the importance of a place, its history, its heritage, the ecology, what it's all about, to an audience who has maybe some understanding of it, and then folks who have known nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really loved that public education component, that public history. I love working with audiences. I love working with guests in that regard. And I just grew passionate about it. And then I kind of kept going from there. So.
Yeah. So had you been to Manhattan, Kansas ever?
I think as a child, we did the let's get to the mountains and see how quickly we can get across the prairie thing. So we did, when I was a kid, I can't believe my mom reminded me of this, a 3-week road trip. We left Michigan and we hit Yellowstone and the Wyoming parks. We hit Utah, Salt Lake City, the Great Salt Lake, the Rocky Mountains, Denver. I think we also did the Badlands, Mount Rushmore on this trip. Huge road trip, 3 weeks. And what I remember the most are the national parks, being in the mountains. And, you know, the Badlands were cool too, and the Black Hills and Mount Rushmore. But to be frank, we didn't really stop between Michigan and the mountains. And I know better now. But at the time, my parents wanted to do that vacation. And so that was what we did. And so I'm sure I was staring out a Ford Aerostar minivan window going across I-80, I-70. I can't remember what it was. But so that was my closest I got to Kansas growing up. But I also worked for the Park Service actually up in North Dakota.
Yeah.
And so being up in a prairie state and talking about that ecology also opened my eyes to what we have here in Kansas.
So you're sitting in Florida, and one day the job comes open in Manhattan, Kansas, and at the Flint Hills Discovery Center. What made you decide to? First, I can understand maybe what made you decide to apply.
Yeah.
But what ultimately made you make the decision to take the job sight unseen?
Opportunity. I mean, at that point, the Discovery Center was only 2.5 years old, and I knew that from everything I saw, everything I read, that this was a state-of-the-art facility, something that had so much potential going forward. And I was familiar enough with some of the content areas about that prairie state, frontier history, the grassland ecology. It was familiar enough that I felt I could hit the ground running and learn what I needed to learn to keep that process going. But I also was attracted by the fact that this was a college town. I was 28 years old at the time, so I was far enough out of college that I was not really with that crowd, but I wasn't really established. I didn't have a family. I wasn't married. I moved here by myself and to a place where I knew nobody. Mm-hmm. And so I got here and it was a matter of rebuilding a social life, figuring out my new workplace. I had a lot of figuring out to do. And even more so than this, personally and in my family life, I moved here almost exactly 1 month after my father passed away. That was another impact on me where I was in the interview process. I had applied when my father fell ill. And so it threw a real wrench into it. And so, you know, this moment of moving to Manhattan in more ways than one was this huge change in my life. And so, but to be completely frank, when I got here, it was about rebuilding so many elements of my life. And for the first 2 to 3 years of being here in Manhattan, I was not sure if this was for me. I really wasn't, because I slowly was getting to know people. You know, I was not part of the K-State world. I wasn't military. I wasn't Fort Riley. I was a single young professional moving here, sight unseen, for a job. And it really took that 2 to 3 years before I finally felt comfortable enough here that I had a foundation, a social network, a group of friends where I could say, okay, I can see myself staying here.
That's a pretty impressive story, in the fact that you just willing sight unseen to do that.
Yeah.
I guess you found your place to live online, and is that right? Okay.
Well, no, actually, we got here, and it was a matter of jumping around to different apartments, and you search what you can, but the goal was to find a place to live within 3 days.
Yeah,
and I did accomplish that because we only stayed in a hotel for 3 nights.
I got you.
And so, luckily at the time there were enough options that I found a place, and it was decent, and I at least lived there for 6 or 7 years, so it couldn't have been that bad, right?
Well, we're glad you made your way here, and glad you decided to stay. So you are now considered one of the top young professionals in the community, and that's
Thank you.
by the fact that you were named one of the 15 under 40 recipients. So how did you feel when you found out you were nominated? Because we always contact the individual and say, you've been nominated, here's an application, please fill us out so that we can get a better feeling about who you are and what you're about. And then how did you feel when you found out you won?
Well, when I got the nomination, my first thought was, dang, now I got to just write about myself, No, it's just one of those things where, I don't know. I couldn't tell you the last time I updated my resume. So it was a matter of digging through all this stuff and saying, okay, what have I done in my job? What qualifies me for this recognition? And so I just put on there what I've been doing at the Discovery Center, some of the funds, the fundraising, some of the grants, some of the projects. And it was quite a process to go through all that, because once you get it down on paper, you kind of get a different perspective about it. And then getting the email and receiving the recognition, it's a real honor, because I have gotten to know this community in the almost decade that I've been here. And I know that there are a lot of really talented, smart, clever, young professionals who are movers and shakers, who are doing things in this town, and to be included on a list of a lot of those other people who I know as my peers, but I also look up to, even other young professionals who I look up to. It's a great honor, and I'm very grateful for it.
So you mentioned the Discovery Center. So for those, and I think most people who are listening know what the Discovery Center is and what you're about. But for those that don't, talk a little bit about what the Discovery Center teaches people, what you showcase, and then what your current role is within the organization.
When I talk about the Flint Hills Discovery Center, I always try to tie it into the bigger story. For those folks in Manhattan, or maybe who are newer to town, I always talk about the downtown redevelopment. The fact that this community had a dream, was ambitious, and took a chance on it. And part of that whole project was the Flint Hills Discovery Center, the idea of leveraging some state funding to create an attraction that would in and of itself be an asset to the community, as well as bring people into Manhattan. What they built is a facility that is a combination of a museum, a science center, a heritage center, a nature center, a community center. There are so many hats that we wear at the Discovery Center. And I think that frankly is by design. The facility that we have as the Flint Hills Discovery Center would be recognized as a stellar institution if it was in a city 5 times as large as Manhattan. But it's in a city of 55,000 people. And I think that attests to that ambition. What I also speak to is this idea that Manhattan is going places. In the time that it was in development and under construction, and then after opening, this is the same time we're talking about NBAF coming here. This is the same time that we're fighting for the BRAC process, base realignment and closure. Is Fort Riley going to stay at the level that it's at? Is the First Division going to stay here? There's a lot of unknowns, but a facility like the Discovery Center is an amazing asset to this community. I speak of it as part of this community's cultural infrastructure. You can build roads, and you can build water mains and high-speed internet and all those amazing assets that make a community attractive for business and attractive for residents. Something like the Discovery Center is amazing because it provides this huge boost to this community's identity, this community's sense of belonging, sense of place here. And I think that the benefits that it provides this community are more than just the physical building, the exhibits, the programs, the experience. It's all that and more. And I think that what it has done over the last 12 years that it's been open is it has grown, it has evolved. It's not the same Discovery Center that it was when it opened. It wasn't even the same Discovery Center, I would say 5 or 6 years ago. It's evolved as an institution, and I'm very lucky that I've been along for that ride. I'd like to think I had something to do with that. I don't take all the credit. I've certainly been involved with a lot of the things there, but we've grown as an institution enormously, and I hope and I know people in this community and in the region see that.
So now that you've been in Manhattan for what, nearly 10 years, right?
This will be my 10th year this year.
Talk about why you've chosen to stay.
Well, I have a wife and a daughter. That's a big part of it now.
And your wife was from Manhattan?
She's originally from Southeast Kansas,
okay,
but came up to go to K-State as an undergrad and has more or less been here since.
I gotcha. Okay.
She's working on her third K-State degree.
Okay.
So she's got me beat in that regard.
Yeah.
So she loves Manhattan, and so we own a home. We have a daughter. I am far more rooted in this community now than, gosh, even just 3-4 years ago. Yeah. So,
how old's your daughter?
She's just about 2 years old.
Okay, and her name is?
Lydia.
Lydia, okay.
Yeah, so she's the love of my life. She's amazing, and this is a great town to grow up in. At least that's what the people who grew up here tell me. So I'll take their word for it, and I can see myself being here for the long haul. It all depends. I have a career. My wife has a career. Like a lot of young professionals now, we have a family, we have kids, we both have a career. There's a lot at play here. And I know a lot of other families who are in similar situations where they have to balance all those factors, your personal, your work, all of that. And, I hope with a little bit of luck, we have a long time left here in Manhattan.
You mentioned that early on you felt like this might not be the place.
Right.
And when did you feel like that, oh no, this is my home? Was it an aha moment, or did it just sort of happen gradually over time?
It's kind of like the biggest thing was finding my people. I have friends who live all over the country in different states and all that, but those are not friends you see regularly. So you need a home base. You need a foundation. You need people who can help you, pile your stuff into a bunch of boxes and help you move across town. You need those types of friends too. So what actually did it for me was I had organized a bus tour through the Discovery Center for a group of international students at K-State. And it just so happened that the international student advisor, Brad, he's my friend now, he's also from Michigan, had gone to Michigan State, boo, but I'll allow it. So, and we razz each other about that all the time. But
you're a little up in the standings right now. Based on
yes,
the recent
we are.
Football season.
That's correct.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
for Michigan fans.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But to meet another young guy, more or less same age, both from Michigan, we really hit it off. And what I found is that he actually had some other friends and gotten to know people because he had that K-State bubble that he was in. And so I joined a softball team after that, a rec league softball team. That was great. I got to do more things with some of their friends, and sort of all it really took was one little person, and then growing out from there and growing out those social networks. And what was actually really interesting too was him and his friends were all very much in a similar boat in that they were also young professionals from somewhere else who had come to Manhattan. Their story resonated with my story. And so I think that was another thing that helped us bond together as a small group, if you will.
It's interesting because your story is part of the reason why we revamped the Hype program.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
I know we did have young professional activities probably when you moved
Yes.
here, but it was not quite as organized and not as regular maybe as it is today. But but this, what we heard over and over again from employers is we have to find somewhere to plug people in.
Yeah.
And that's even people who graduate from K-State because once you graduate, you can hang around for a year or two, but after a while it's it's clearly not your scene anymore. And so that's why the Hype program has become so important to us.
And I actually think about that. I've seen that Hype program grow and evolve. And, man, if that had been in place, 10 years ago when I got here, I often wonder what my journey would have been like. Would it have been different? Possibly. Especially that social function, that sense of belonging. That's huge because the chamber does great activities, but if you're a young professional getting here, you need more than your business world. You need a social world. You need that. And Hype does a good job of providing some of those avenues. Yeah. So that's a great thing. So
if you're describing, and you talked about why you chose to stay and the impacts on you, but you obviously get a lot of visitors into the Discovery Center. And if you're describing, if somebody says, why should I move to Manhattan? What would be the description you would give them about why they should consider moving here?
The one thing that has impressed me more than anything else about Manhattan is its sense of identity. Through my job and through living here for 10 years, I've gotten to know a comprehensive slice of this community, every demographic, every part of this community. And what is true across all parts of this community is that sense of identity, that people from this place take pride in this place, that they identify with Manhattan, that this is something that they live. I grew up in suburban Detroit, no different than, for your Kansas context, than growing up in a Shawnee or an Overland Park or a Lenexa. How many people from those places when they travel say, oh, I'm from Lenexa? No, they say they're from Kansas City. But are they really? It's that suburban sprawl where one city blends into another. That's kind of what I grew up in. And so coming to Manhattan, it was so shocking to see a community, to me at least, that was, in a sense, geographically isolated. But the benefit of that is that it really bolsters that identity. And you've got K-State on top of it, and you've got so many other elements that really strengthen that, which is why people come to retire here, which is why people come back after they graduated. That's such an intangible asset that this town has that other places simply do not have. And I don't know how you can quantify it, but it matters. And I've seen it at work.
So what are some things that inspire you or motivate you to get engaged in the community?
Well, it's finding the thing that I'm interested in. Years ago now, to give you a great example, before I'd moved here, I'd been part of an improv comedy troupe in Florida, and I looked for that here in Kansas and Manhattan. I didn't find it. Yeah. And after a year or two of frustration, I said, well, shoot, if it doesn't exist, I might as well start it. And so I tried for about 9 months or a year, tried to hold these twice a month sort of get-togethers, improv workshops. It went along, fits and starts, but eventually I just threw up my arms and said, I guess there just aren't enough people in this town. And
all I know about improv is yes and.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
So, that's one of the things I learned is that Manhattan may not have everything you need or want. And if it doesn't exist, you may have to step up and do it yourself. Because I guarantee there are other people in the same boat who want that same thing. They're just looking for a leader, someone to take that initiative. And I did on that particular project, and it didn't pan out. I did my best for a year and all that, but I've since gotten involved in other things. I'm on the Manhattan Library Association board. Great group of people. Who doesn't love our library here in Manhattan? it's such an easy thing to support and fundraise for. So, and then now I'm on the advisory board for the public administration program at K-State. So helping that academic program grow and sustain itself. So it's really about what am I passionate about and where can I help?
So what advice would you have for a young professional? And usually we ask this question about just getting out of school, but I'm going to ask you a little different. What advice would you have for a young professional who was considering moving to Manhattan for an employment opportunity?
Boy, I would say Manhattan has some great opportunities if you give it a chance. It's not going to wow you like other places, but if you're in it for the long run, this place has some amazing resources, some amazing assets, some amazing people. It's a place that is friendly, that people are genuine, and that it's an authentic place.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that everywhere. And, if you give this place a chance, it might be your home too.
And then what advice would you just have generally for a young professional?
Don't sweat the small stuff. I would say it takes time.
Yeah.
I've now worked at the same place for almost a decade. A lot of people my age and younger would have never worked at the same place for a year or two, let alone 10.
Yeah.
So see where your opportunities are. Sometimes the grass is not always greener on the other side. So you just got to make the best decision and not look back and have too many regrets.
That's good advice. So that's the end of the formal interview process, and we're going to move to the rapid fire. And this is where we get to learn a little more about you in a little less formal way. So
all right.
Are you ready to get rolling on this?
Yes, and.
All right. Yes, and. What movie have you seen the most times?
As a kid, I went through a phase where every day after school, I popped in the VHS tape of Jurassic Park. And I've probably never seen a movie that many times since.
Yeah, I think a lot of people watch Jurassic Park a lot of times.
Oh, so, when you're a kid,
yeah,
dinosaurs on the big screen, Spielberg, can't be beat.
Yeah. So interesting, when I was a kid, probably the age you're talking about, we didn't have VCRs, or the wealthy had VCRs.
Sure.
We didn't have VCRs. And so movies would stay in theaters a long time.
Yeah.
So they'd stay in the theaters, and then we had these things called dollar theaters. I don't know if you remember dollar theaters. And I think I saw Star Wars like 20 times in the theater.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The first year it was out. So that's kind of my Jurassic Park. What do you want people to remember about you?
That I made them laugh.
Yes, and. What job did you want as a kid?
I wanted to be either a chef or an architect. Now, psychoanalyze that all you want.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Interesting.
I just love creating beautiful things.
All right. If someone paid you to write a blog or a book about anything, what would it be about?
When I went to grad school, I wrote a master's thesis. It's about 40 pages long. I've always wanted to develop that more. And it's all American history. So one of these days, maybe I will.
What is the most unusual pet you've had?
I have to emphasize my work pets at the Discovery Center. I'm in charge of 2 snakes, a turtle, and a salamander.
Oh.
And I never thought I'd ever do something like that in my life.
There you go. What's the coolest place you've traveled?
I went on a hike in the jungle in Thailand to look for wild elephants.
Wow. Did you find them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Impressive.
Yeah.
Intimidating.
Yeah.
Although not as scary as the leeches that would crawl around the floor and try to crawl up on you.
No, that does not sound appealing at all.
I'll take an elephant over a leech any day.
Yeah. What is the one thing that instantly makes your day better?
A good night's rest.
That with a 2-year-old, that's
oh
probably...
my gosh. A 2-year-old, a dog, a cat, 2 snakes, a turtle, and a salamander. Yes, a good night's rest.
We just went on vacation, my wife and I, with our kids and our grandkids, and we have 2 1-year-old grandkids, almost 2, and so I feel your pain in that regard. So, what did you do as a teenager that makes you cringe now?
The absolute atrocious amount of hair gel I put in my hair. That was the early 2000s, the boy bands, the frosted tips. boy, it was bad.
Yeah. Do you prefer, and I think I probably know this answer, but do you prefer working remotely or in the office?
I have seen the value of remote work, but I am an office worker. Yeah. I love being around people. It
would be hard to do your job remotely.
It would be.
Yeah.
Although for a time I was doing it remotely.
We all did.
Yeah.
What and this is similar to what we talked about earlier, I'm sure, but what advice would you give the 19-year-old you?
I'll just say it again. Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Life's too big. You got too many things going on. Somehow life finds a way.
Yeah. Part of our normal questions, normally we ask, what podcast do you listen to? So, but since you brought up improv, because I'm a closet improv listener.
Okay.
And my favorite improv comedian is Paul F. Tompkins. I don't know if you know who Paul F. Tompkins
I do.
is. So my favorite, because he doesn't have a consistent show, but my favorite podcast of any kind is Comedy Bang Bang, which is a complete improv podcast.
Yeah.
Scott Aukerman, who also had the TV show Comedy Bang Bang.
Yeah.
Do you listen to improv on podcasts or something else?
No, I've not really been big into the podcast.
Okay.
Growing up, I would watch on reruns the British Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then they had the American version, several iterations of it.
The British one was had a lot of the same characters.
It did, yeah. Although it was distinctly British.
Oh, 100%.
And you know, I would cringe when I would watch them try to do a scene in the style of a particular author.
Yeah.
That would never fly in this country.
Yeah.
So, but TV, not a podcast, but growing up with Saturday Night Live, Kids in the Hall.
Oh, yeah.
All the great comedy bits of the 90s and early 2000s were very formative for me.
Yeah.
So
well, check out Comedy Bang Bang. It's also on TV. They had about 5 seasons on IFC. So it's very good. Stephen, thanks for joining us today. Congratulations on winning 15 under 40. Is well deserved. And thank you for all the work you do on behalf of the community at the Discovery Center. And good luck to you moving forward.
Thank you. I said it before. I'll say it again. It's truly an honor to not yet be 40.
There you go. The Think MHK podcast is brought to you by the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Think MHK podcast on your preferred podcast provider, and you will never risk missing an episode. If you enjoyed our show, please give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. To find out more about today's topic or other chamber activities, please go to manhattan.org. And now back to today's show. Our guest today on the Think MHK podcast is Kara Titus. Kara is the Community Relations Manager for Lightsource BP, which we'll ask her a little more about in a minute. But she is appearing on our show today because she is one of our 15 under 40 winners for 2024. So, Kara, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
So we always ask our guests to start off by talking about who they are, where they came from, and how they ended up in Manhattan.
Well, I'll give you the quick story of that. I've been in the Manhattan area since 2015. I moved here after getting engaged to Kenny. We met when I was working in Topeka in the state legislature. He was still in law school. And shortly after I met him, I moved to Washington, D.C., was working for Senator Jerry Moran. And so when we got engaged, I told the senator I'd have to move home. He said, well, I have an opening in my Manhattan office. Would you be interested in switching there? And when I told Kenny, he said, if we can move to Manhattan, we're moving to Manhattan. So we enthusiastically started looking this way. He was finishing up law school, got offered a job at the Kansas Department of Transportation. And so he was working in Topeka. We were in Wamego for 4 years before moving to Manhattan in 2019.
Since you brought it up, and I was not going to bring up till later in the podcast, but your husband is Kenny Titus, who is state representative for District 51, which is Pottawatomie County. And so you all are quite the power couple. So you are now at a company called Lightsource BP. Talk about what that is.
So I'm a remote worker now. I'm working out of my home. Lightsource BP is a subsidiary organization of BP. We do all of their solar development. It was a 50-50 joint venture, but in December, BP announced purchasing the other 50% of our company. So we're in the middle of that transition plan. But we do utility scale solar development across the world. And I'm in the U.S. America's arm, so we focus on the United States and Brazil. I have 27 states in my territory. I do community relations for them, help our developers with permitting challenges, community challenges, NIMBYism, building institutional support for our projects. So it's been really great. I've been there since last April. It's been a fast, almost year now. So it's been exciting.
Yeah. And so you got involved with the chamber. You've been involved with the chamber for a number of years, but primarily when you were with Kansas Gas. So you did this similar role at Kansas Gas. What made you decide to jump from, I work for this company that's got a new office building on the west side of town, and to, I'm going to go to work for this large multinational company and work out of my home and have to travel to 27 states?
I really loved working for Kansas Gas Service, and I really loved having a job that allowed me to get really involved in my community, and that was something I was looking for. And it was definitely a hard decision to decide to make the leap. But part of the reason, and I don't think I'm alone in this, is that for me to move forward in my career at Kansas Gas Service, it was pretty clear I was going to have to move to Tulsa. And that wasn't interesting to me. That's not something my family wanted to do. And then, of course, with Kenny's position, that's also not possible for us to do. So that's when I knew I needed to be open.
You can't be a state representative remote, I guess.
No, not yet.
Yeah.
Hopefully not ever.
Yeah.
So I knew I needed to look elsewhere. So I put my little open to work thing on LinkedIn, and Lightsource BP actually found me. I feel really lucky that they reached out. And at first I was really skeptical because I'm like, how can you do community relations remote? And I, to be honest, am still kind of figuring that out. But it's some travel, it's virtual meetings and calls, it's leaning on other team members who are closer to our sites and communities. But they gave me the opportunity to advance my career, and I have the same title, but it's a completely different field and industry from where I was, and the growth opportunity was something that was too hard to pass up.
It's probably a job pre-COVID you wouldn't have been available like this, right?
No, probably not.
Yeah. We've gone so far with our abilities and the way we've accepted virtual meetings today compared to where we were pre-COVID. So your primary role is working with the company as they develop new solar farms.
Yep.
Are they called? We call them solar farms. Is that their technical term?
Yeah, utility scale solar sites.
Oh,
but solar farms
that sounds a lot more.
We like farms
important.
better, and especially since we practice agrivoltaics, we want it to maintain that farm mentality.
Yeah, and so what does a solar development look like? How do you evaluate those kind of things?
Yeah, they come in all different shapes and sizes. And one thing that I really appreciate about Lightsource BP is that they're community minded, and they really want to build projects to fit the community. We have some solar sites that have up to 40 landowners that we're working with. They span thousands of acres. And we have others that are a single landowner, and we're complementing their current farm operation. So it really kind of runs a wide range. And what also really stuck out to me about Lightsource BP and the way that they develop solar is that they really prioritize what is called agrivoltaics. And it's the blending of agricultural practice and solar. And we're really just at the tip of the iceberg of what that looks like. But for now, for us, it looks like planting native grasses and pollinators underneath our panels, measuring for water retention and soil nutrients over time, and then implementing sheep grazing where it's possible to be our vegetation management plan.
Yeah, nice. And this last question, I promise, about your new job. But one of the things, because it relates to the chamber, that is interesting is you wanted to stay engaged with Manhattan and the chamber, and so you convinced Lighthouse BP to join the Manhattan Chamber.
I did. Yeah. In the negotiation period, I told them, I said, well, there's only a couple of things that I'm concerned about. And the first is I can't travel during session. I have to stay home with my boys. And the second is I want to remain involved in my community and remain a member of the chamber and they were happy to oblige that and become members and support my involvement in the chamber. And it has come in handy. In my few first months on the job, Mike was able to connect me with the Kansas Farm Bureau, who quickly connected me to the American Farm Bureau. That was a huge win for our company as we started trying to build a partnership there. And then even working with K-State on some things. Manhattan has a lot to offer, even to big companies like BP.
Yeah, well, we're glad that you stayed involved and you're on our policy committee and on our board, and so we appreciate that. So thank you for that. So let's talk about why you're actually here, because I was just nosy about some of these other things, and I think that the people who listen might have some interest in that as well. But you're on because you were named, as we mentioned, one of the 15 under 40 winners in our second class. So that was a 2-part process. You get nominated by somebody, and if you're nominated, we contact you and ask you to fill out an application just so we can get a better feel for who you are. And we had more nominations this year than we had previous, and we had more applications than we had previous. So we're real excited that it is taken off and there's a lot of interest. And it became very hard, I think, for the committee to make those choices. So congratulations. But how did you feel, number one, about being nominated and kind of finding out about that? And then the second, when you found out that you were selected?
I'm going to be honest. I really don't like questions like this because I blush a lot. I'm really honored. And I'm already making my own list of people to nominate because I think it is really important to recognize outstanding professionals in our community, people who care, people who engage, because that's what a community needs to thrive. And so I'm really glad that we have this program, and I'm just really honored that I get to be a part of it.
Yeah. So we have a lot of I referred a minute ago to power couples, but we have a lot of power couples where the husband and wife both have been nominated, and so you won before Kenny. Was there any smack talk when you got that, or?
Here's the problem. Kenny is no longer eligible.
Oh, okay.
So last year would have been his only year that he could have been, and it was before he had even entered office, and
people didn't know him yet.
Yeah, people didn't know him yet.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a little sad that he doesn't get the opportunity, but he doesn't care about those things. So
I actually have a funny story about that. So when I moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, I was the head of economic development for the chamber, and the Business Journal in Omaha had 40 under 40 for Lincoln, and I was 35, 36 when I moved there, and I never got it, and it always kind of bothered me. And then one day I figured out it wasn't because people didn't think I was worthy of the award, it's because people didn't think I was under 40. And I said, I'm not sure which is worse, right? I think I'd rather. I don't know. It just was something that as I thought about it, I thought, well, I don't know if that was good or bad. But so tell Kenny, I thought he was under 40. So I might have even nominated him next year. So
well, we don't have to tell anyone.
Yeah, we won't. Yeah. So all of you listening, don't tell anybody Kenny's over 40. So what do you think makes Manhattan a special place to live? And I have live and work on my question, but what do you think makes Manhattan a special place?
I think it's opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity here, and you put in you get out what you put in. But I get to travel around to small towns or comparable cities, across the Midwest, Northeast portion of the United States, and I'm always happy to come home. And I think that's a really good sign that I am where I'm supposed to be. Because there's not this grass is greener on the other side mentality. But Manhattan has good people. And by that, I mean top talent. As you mentioned, we have a lot of power couples, a lot of really great people here doing a lot of really great things. It's pretty here. And as a bonus, the traffic's not that bad. But I also think that I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the challenges ahead of us. And for Manhattan to remain a special place, it's going to take really strong leadership. It's going to take hard decisions, and it's going to take frank conversations to maintain our culture and the parts that make Manhattan, Manhattan. And so, as our city strategic plan aptly put, we are at a crossroads.
So dive into that a little bit, because as you know, at the annual meeting this year, I made similar statements to that. But go a little bit more in depth into that, because I know you well enough to know you've thought these things through. But what are one or two key things that as a community we're going to need to think about over the next couple of years?
I think you can look at my job and at my husband's job, who also is a remote worker for a Wichita-based company. Jobs is a huge portion. There are other young professionals that we're losing in our community due to lack of jobs. And so when I think of, how do we keep top talent here? How do we bring top talent here? It's primarily through jobs. And
we're in the process of undergoing sort of a 6-7 year look at our economic development strategic plan, because we understand that's important. And I think for years and years, and people have heard me talk about this, we have relied on the public sector to carry us. And what we've discovered over the last decade is while it does provide a bit of a floor, the ceiling on that has become a lot lower than it used to be. And so we have to really think about private sector job growth and where we're going to get that.
Well, and it was a government job that brought me to Manhattan. It was a government job that brought Kenny to Manhattan when he was chief counsel at the Department of Agriculture. But after I left Senator Moran's office, I went to grad school, but I got a job in Topeka. After that, I worked for the city of Abilene, and it took 4.5 years for me to find a job in Manhattan again, to get back to Manhattan, where I wasn't commuting out. And then when it came time again to make another career change, I had to go to a British company and become a remote worker. And so this is a problem that I see over and over again, that you can get the first job in Manhattan, but you can't get the second, and you're really probably not going to find the third.
Well, and once you leave for the second, you get settled in other places, and it becomes harder, even for people who want to come back, right? Their kids get in school and they get settled, and it just becomes harder. So those are good points. So you hit on this a little bit, but what is the reason that you and Kenny, other than Kenny got elected, and you obviously, he wouldn't have run if you hadn't planned to stay, but what is the reason that you guys have chosen to stay in the region?
I think it's very accurate that you call it a choice, because living in Manhattan is a choice. And I think personally it's a hard choice. And I say that because there are days that it feels like it's against my own best interest to stay here. And I feel like I have to fight to stay here for the reasons that we just talked about. Employment. This today or tomorrow is the last day that Hope Lutheran childcare is in operation. So we had to scramble and find new childcare for my son. I mentioned a few years ago when my children were trying to get speech therapy, it was a months long waiting list for that. And so the longer that we stay here and we are trying to raise our family and trying to progress our careers and find housing and even keep community, because we're such a transient community, finding a stable friend base and community base is a challenge. It is a very intentional choice to stay here. And the reason that we stay here is that opportunity. It's not necessarily easy, but it's good. And we enjoy being a part of Manhattan.
So as somebody, again, you've gone through a lot of these experiences. And so as you talk to people or you have a chance to interact with young professionals, what advice have you given them, or what advice would you give them as they begin to launch their careers?
I really struggled with this question and thinking about it, because I have a few things, and some of it's kind of cliche. Like, I hated when I was and I am a young professional, but when I was just getting started and just so eager and so idealistic, and it was just wait, just be patient, good things will come. I hated hearing that. But I want to say, it is true. All things usually do end up working together. There's patience is a really probably 2/3, 3/4 of it. But I'm going to bring this to a very more practical level. If I had to say to a young professional, if there's one thing that you need to work on to better yourself as a professional, it is writing and communication is so important. And I always struggled with writing in school. I wasn't a great writer. I didn't learn how to write until I worked for Senator Jerry Moran. His team taught me how to write. And I still read books on writing. I still take courses on writing. But the difference between a good employee and a great employee is their ability to write and communicate effectively. So if you want to become a better employee, better professional, improve your writing.
That's an interesting concept. So I was not a great writer when I was younger and ended up going into the journalism field. And I would say I'm not a great, I like, if I had to sit down and write a novel, it would be awful, right? But I learned how to write effectively in a way that I could take complicated topics and put it where people would understand, because you just repetition of nothing else, right? And it really has, I think, made a difference for me in my career and how far I've been able to get. And I haven't really thought about it from that standpoint, but it is a good point that sometimes you judge unknowingly, but you judge people based on the quality of writing when they send you an email or send you a letter. And the more we get away from formal writing and more to text messaging and those kind of things, it seems to get progressively worse.
Yes. So I recently read a book called Smart Brevity, and it addresses that very thing, how to write in a quick 120 character world. And it really changed my entire philosophy around how I want to present my ideas and how I want to write them. And so that's a great book to pick up and peruse through.
Well, that's one book. So we always ask our young professionals in particular, are there any podcasts or that you're listening to or books that you're reading that you'd like to share with other people?
So most days when I'm listening to podcasts, it's with my children. So we're doing a lot of Veggie Tales,
I've been there.
Gospel Adventure. When I have time to listen to a podcast, one of my favorites right now is called The Thinking Fellows. And it's just a whole bunch of academic theologians around a table, much like this. They'll talk doctrine, theology, literature, politics, culture, pop culture. So that's...
Okay. Well, good. I'll have to follow up on it. So that's the end of our formal interview process. We're going to head into the rapid fire. And this is the most popular segment. So, and I've been told by our listeners. So we ask you some questions just to kind of get to know you better, and you try to limit it to 1 or 2 sentences, although we're not going to cut you off if you need to tell a little backstory, because sometimes that happens. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. What movie have you seen the most?
The Prince of Egypt.
Interesting. I think, is that the cartoon?
That's the cartoon one.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a Broadway version now.
Okay.
And it's on Amazon, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
But
I think I saw that a long time ago, maybe when my kids were little. If you could only watch one movie or television show for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Gilmore Girls.
Oh, okay. That's my sister-in-law and niece would watch that.
Huge fan.
What do you want people to remember about you?
That I tried.
It's a good thing. What job did you want when you were a kid?
I wanted to be a missionary like my mom and dad.
Oh, yeah. I forgot you told me that before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If someone paid you to write a blog or book about anything, what would that be about?
This is tongue in cheek.
Mm-hmm.
I would write a book about how much being a young professional sucks, but how you just have to get through it. Because I think there's so much turmoil in your early 20s when you're just figuring out life in general. It's all very normal. But when you're going through it, it doesn't feel that way. And then I currently do write a bit of a blog, although I'm not very consistent with it. I make Latin coloring books for children. It's my, I guess, special talent maybe. And I write blogs about learning Latin and the benefits of classical education.
You know, just go back, and we're going to go off subject for just a minute. But one of the things you brought it up when you said give advice, when you were giving advice, and then you brought it up there again. I think there is a delicate balance, and it's really hard to kind of put your finger on and describe, but there is a delicate balance between people who say be patient versus people who are just saying, yeah, I don't want to do that, right? And sometimes I think it's good to push people to do things they may not want to do. And when they tell you to be patient, I think it's okay to question why, right?
There are jobs I stayed in too long that I should have left. You know, as I was like kind of thinking about things I wanted to talk about, one of the things I wanted to share was, you know, there have been times in my professional career where I knew I was doing really well. I was being told I was doing really well. I was getting great feedback, getting, you know, unpaid extra work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this like, be patient. Like the promotion will come, the raise will come, the advancement will come. Just be patient. But then, the excuses would come in. Well, you don't have this qualification and you've never done that. And I started thinking, do I need to go get a second master's degree? Do I need to go get a professional certification of some sort? And that, if you're in that spot where you're feeling unqualified, even though you're doing good,
Mm-hmm.
leave, move on. And I say that knowing in Manhattan, it can be hard to leave.
Yeah.
But you're right. To that point, there is a difference between being patient and realizing that there's just not opportunity for you there.
Or just systems in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, systems are every job pretty much has systems, and they've been put in place at some point for a valid reason. But systems don't always, they're not supposed to be in perpetuity, right? I mean,
Right.
systems are made to be changed, and I think it's okay to question that. But it also is good to be patient, right? So I wish I had the exact answer for that, but I think it's important to question things. And I think people, at least I hope that my staff would say that I have an open door if they want to, why is this way? And I try to explain it the best way possible, and willing to look at alternates if there's an alternate way of doing something better. What was your first job?
Spangles, it just tastes better.
There you go. Who inspires you the most and why?
This is cheesy. It's Kenny, my husband. He just does so much. He carries it all so well. But yeah, he definitely drives me to be better and do better.
Yeah. Cheesy's okay. What is your most prized possession?
My grandmother's jewelry box. I inherited it after she passed away. And every time I open it, it smells like her. And I love it. It's my favorite thing.
What skill would you most like to learn?
How to use knives, specifically in the kitchen.
Yeah. Is there a way to use knives? I've not really ever thought about that.
I think so. I mean, I'd like to chop things better.
Oh.
And I'd like to learn how to like take a chicken, like a whole chicken, and like quarter it up and divide it.
So like kitchen skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would be cool for me too. I think I'd like that also. What is this is our last question. So fittingly, what is the one question you wish people would ask you less?
Who's watching the kids?
Yeah.
I promise it's an uninteresting answer.
Yeah.
It's a babysitter.
Yeah.
Every time. We don't have family here. It's a babysitter.
Yeah.
Oh, which by the way, I'm going to give my babysitter a shout out. She is starting a Disney princess birthday party appearance business.
Okay.
So if you need Elsa or Cinderella to come, call me. I can hook you up.
Yeah. Just Disney. She's not using the official costumes, I'm sure. So why do we ask that question? I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, I think it's just one of those things that you're trying to create conversation, but no, I left them at home by themselves because they're however old, they can manage it, right? Yeah. No, somebody's watching them and you don't know them.
They're in the car.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I cracked the window.
Yeah. Well, Kara, congratulations again for your 1540 and thank you for convincing BP to join the chamber and staying engaged. And thanks for being on our podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Think MHK, a podcast produced by the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. If you enjoyed the Think MHK podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe and share it out on your social media channels. Feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce.